Hey everybody, welcome back to the Power Saw Shop. Thanks for coming and hanging out in my shop with me again. Today's video is about timing numbers, but not just any timing numbers, stock timing numbers. Over the years, I've timed a bazillion stock saws, and what I did is I went through my notebook today and I wrote down different saws that I've timed, starting at 50cc and going all the way to 90cc. This is going to be a two-part series. This is the first part, stock timing numbers. I want to show you where certain saws time, and then let's talk about how they run. In the second part of the series, in the next video, I made a quick and dirty cheat sheet for porting, kind of to give you guys a rough guesstimate of where you can go with certain size saws. So anyhow, thanks for joining in. Stay tuned. We're going to get to stock timing numbers. Hope you guys enjoy this.
She cuts, eh?
Okay, so what I did today is I took all these different saws that I've timed over the years and I wrote them down on these pieces of paper so that you guys could see where certain saws that I've timed stock. And maybe you guys own that saw and you've run it and maybe you wonder why it runs the way it does. Well, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it has to do with the timing numbers. So whether it's this 028 cutaway, I've timed this, or a 288 Husqvarna, I have the timing numbers written down in my book. And today's video, let's talk about stock timing numbers so you guys can kind of get an idea of the numbers on saws that maybe you guys own, and think about how they run and maybe why they run the way they do, and maybe it has to do with the timing. I'm going to bring you guys into the bench. Let's start going through these cheat sheets I wrote down, and let's talk about certain saws, starting with a Stihl 028 Super. Okay, so the first saw we're going to time, the timing numbers, is a Stihl 028 Super. Now, first things first, what do you notice in this saw? Well, it's got a pretty good sized little dome there. Huge windows in the piston. Huge windows. And pretty good sized transfers for, pretty good sized transfers for a 50cc saw. Okay, so let's see how this thing timed and let's talk about it. If you guys ever run an 028 Super, they're strong. They run really well, really well. They pull decent RPM. They got good chain speed in the cut. They're pretty fast. Nice saw. And it's a Super. Well, what makes it a Super? Let's look at the timing numbers and see. Okay, so I cut off the bottom so you guys can kind of focus on this. Okay, so these are all stock timing numbers of saws that I've timed. Stihl 028 Super, it's 50cc. I don't know if it's 49, 48, 51. It's in that 50cc range. So what is true about all 50cc saws? Well, they don't have a lot of torque. Most of them don't. Some of the old home lights and stuff like that, they're pretty grunty. But for the most part, these kind of saws, they don't have a lot of torque. Now, one thing I'm going to say before we get into this, those of you guys that port know there are going to be some variances in how some saws run. Some saws have weird timing numbers and don't run the way the timing numbers make you think it should. But for all practical purposes, these are average timing numbers that you'd find on pretty common saws. Okay, so we got a Stihl 028 Super. Exhaust 104 after top dead center. Okay, That's where this times. This is the cutaway. Okay, that's where this cutaway times. Okay, so the exhaust opens 104 after top dead center. Transfers on this saw 128 after top dead center. So this saw has 24 degrees of blowdown, right? 128 minus 104 is 24 degrees of blowdown. Intake on this saw, pretty healthy intake, 146 degrees total opening. Okay, so what this tells me is this saw has a fairly low exhaust roof, but this would be a normal exhaust roof for a 50cc saw. Okay, long blowdown and fairly long intake timing. This timing's longer than what you typically see on a lot of 70cc saws stock. So think about that. Any of you guys out there that have a 028 Super, how do these run? They run good. They pull good RPM. They're nice and torquey. They're strong, okay? So think about that. 50cc saw, 104 exhaust roof. I'm going to move this up. Homelight XL76. You guys know these 57cc's. This is the saw that kind of got me going on YouTube. I was just horsing around, but when I port these things, they get just stupid. Absolutely stupid. Okay, exhaust. Well, 104. Same as the 028 Super. Okay, blowdown on these, 122. 18 degrees of blowdown. So I want you to think about that. How do home lights run? Or Max, for that fact. Okay. Short blowdown on this compared to this. Okay. There's 6 degrees more blowdown on the 028 Super. Okay. Intake. Well, it's reeds. So 180 degrees total opening. It's less than that because it parks at top dead center for 4 or 5 degrees on those home lights. So I mean, really, it's 176 total opening. The reason why it can be open for so long is the minute you get any back pressure, the reeds close, right? Okay, so how does a stock XL76 run? Well, full squirt, 100 or 10,000 RPM roughly, where this saw runs at, say, 13,000 RPM with the same exhaust roof. How is that possible? It's kind of interesting, isn't it? These run at 10,000 RPM. They do have a governed carb. With a non-governed carb, I can get these to run to like 11.5, but still, they're kind of maxed out. But it's interesting. They only have 18 degrees of blowdown. They kind of gasp for air, it seems, with that short blowdown. The only way that I could get these to run faster is by increasing the blowdown. True story. Little trade secret of the XL76s that I've built. I need this to get higher, but I can't do machine work. So the only way to get it higher is to move that up. Okay, next one. A lot of you guys probably have these. 365 Special. Grunty. Just a super grunty, low RPM, easy-going saw. It's not a fire breather, but it makes a broad power band. It's an easy saw to use. Kind of a lot like this stock. This is an easy saw to use, broad power band, nice and torquey. 101 after top dead center is where I see these typically time. So notice, as the displacement goes up, okay, 50cc is 104. 57cc, 104. 65cc, 101. Okay? You find that interesting? You guys are going to notice patterns. I want you guys to pay attention to this stuff. Transfers open, 120 after top dead center. 365 Specials have typically 18 to 20 degrees of blowdown, depending on your cylinder and piston combo. 19 degrees of blowdown. Intake, 144 total opening. So, shorter than the 028 Super, but a bigger saw. So, interesting. Now, these don't pull a lot of RPM, even with a 101 exhaust roof. They're not lazy, but they're easy going. Like, they don't have a peaky power band. You know, they're not crazy revvy. They don't rev up super fast. They're just a nice firewood saw for your average guy to go and cut firewood. Okay? So, that's those three. Let's have another look at another page. Here's a saw that a lot of us use and love. The old school 266 SE. Okay, this is the old model. Again, low RPM, good torque curve, good power band, not the biggest RPM saw. A lot like the 365, just a good firewood saw. Well, 104 exhaust roof. Now, this is a shorter stroke saw than the 365, so that might be a reason why they have that lower exhaust roof. But again, we're back to 104, same as the other two saws. 124 after top dead center is the transfers, so that's 20 degrees of blowdown. Intake, 144 total opening. Okay. Notice, same intake timing as the 365. Basically the same transfer timing. The exhaust is lower though. So you might want to ask yourself, why is the exhaust lower? It pulls the same kind of RPM, similar torque as the 365 Special, but a lower exhaust roof. Maybe that's because the stroke is shorter on this, which it is. Okay, same thing though, 20 degrees of blowdown. Let's look at another legendary saw. I don't want to leave the Dolmar guys out. Sax Dolmar 120 Super. That's a long stroke saw, 68 cc's. Pretty strong saw, not a high RPM saw, but they cut. They don't seem to run out of breath in the cut. Just a nice cutting saw. 103 exhaust roof on that. Okay, transfers 125, so it's 22 degrees of blowdown. And notice intake 150. So you notice on this one, low exhaust roof. Well, it's not a super high RPM saw, so that would be in agreement with the RPM that saw pulls. Longer blowdown, but notice when you have longer blowdown, you seem to have a longer intake timing. Now I ported this saw. We could talk about this in the next video, but I'm pretty sure I put it at 101. But I left, and at 101, the blowdown's now 24, and I think my intake's at like 155. Okay. We should pull that saw out again and run it. Okay, just gonna go right here. The legendary Husqvarna 372 XP. 100 after top dead center, and again, this is a 72cc saw. How do these run? Pull pretty good RPM, don't they? Well, 100 exhaust roof. That higher exhaust roof usually, not always, but usually will allow a higher RPM in the saw, okay? 100 exhaust roof. Transfers 121. So this saw has 21 degrees of blowdown, similar to that Sax Dolmar. 142 degrees of total opening. Okay, so notice pretty much the same intake timing as the 365 and the 266. And notice the blowdown's shorter. Do these two have anything to do with each other? You got to think about this. But again, that higher exhaust roof kind of, you expected that, right? Because 372s run at a high RPM. Let's look at another legendary saw, the MS440 044, 72 cc's. This saw, in my hands, is a little torqueier, okay? This saw is more revvy. This is a better softwood saw to me, stock, and this is a better hardwood saw. I have both. I run both. Okay. Well, 99 exhaust roof. Well, that would make sense because these seem to be a little bit zingier. At least all the ones I've had have been. Transfer 120. 21 degrees of blowdown. Same as the 372. Don't you find that interesting? Intake 144. Same as the 365 and the 266, and roughly 2 degrees more than the 372. But again, they're in the ballpark. You might time another 372 and it'll be 144. Okay, so you notice that? 1 degree higher, the saw is a little zippier. Not as torquey though, and that's all it takes sometimes is 1 degree. But same blowdown and pretty much same intake opening. Okay? Let's look at the 460. The 460 I had here, exhaust was at 100. Again, nice high exhaust roof for a 77cc saw. Longer blowdown. Now, as the displacement gets bigger, often you'll notice you can have a longer blowdown. Okay, 26 degrees of blowdown from here to here. Intake, 144. Again, don't you find that interesting? Now, these I find lack wind, meaning they don't want to cut at high RPM. And as you guys saw in the last build I did not raise the exhaust roof. I actually shortened the blowdown a couple degrees in that last build. I gave it more intake timing, but what did I mostly do to that saw? I worked the piston to make the windows bigger, and I gave it bigger transfers. That saw cuts circles around a stock one now, and I really didn't change these two numbers really at all. I didn't raise the exhaust roof. I simply gave it more air and fuel and allowed that air to pass to the top of the piston easier. Okay, so there is a lot to timing numbers, but it's not always timing numbers. But if I took this same saw and put the exhaust at 98, well, guess what? It wouldn't pull a long bar as well. It would still be a fire breather. It would pull more RPM. In softwood, it might be a better saw, but for general purpose logging work saw like I was building, this is a better number, okay? And this was the stock number. I left it there. Okay, so again, 144 again. Now, I included this just for fun. 288 XP Husky, 88 cc's. Another saw that doesn't really like to rev, okay? It really doesn't like to rev. But yet it has a 100 exhaust roof, and it's 90 cc darn near, but it doesn't like to rev. Well, look. 18 degrees of blowdown and 150 total opening on the intake. Okay? You may notice the old saws too. Most of the old saws are 18 to 15 degrees of blowdown. I've timed Max that are like 80 cc that have 10 degrees of blowdown. Well, what do you notice about those old saws? They tend to go a little bit lean on the top. They gasp for air. Now again, when I built that fire breathing 288, what did I do? I opened the lowers up, opened the piston windows up, and gave it more intake timing. Okay? But I didn't raise that. In fact, by the time I was done, that was at like 102. But yet the saw screams now. So again, bigger saw, more intake timing generally. Smaller saw, less intake timing. There are variations. The first number you need to look at is this, okay? Your exhaust roof. Generally, your saws that pull more RPM, okay? As long as they flow enough air, piston window wise in that, generally your saws that pull more RPM tend to have a little bit longer blowdown, what I find, and a little bit higher exhaust roof. Now, 104 seems low, but not when you're talking 50 cc's. Okay? 57 cc's. Well, 101, 100. Okay, so you notice reoccurrences in the timing numbers, and that's because timing is timing. And, I mean, there is a set of parameters. Again, 144 intake, 99 exhaust, 142 intake, 100 exhaust. Okay, 144. Okay, guys, so I hope that kind of sheds some light. I hope maybe some of you guys own some of these saws. Now, let's talk about a saw that breaks all the rules and is absolutely nuts. 200T. These saws are nuts, all right? Have you guys ever run one of these? Absolutely nuts. High RPM. Absolutely scream. And they cut. But what do they lack? Torque. Well, they're only 35 cc's, right? Here's a stock 200T. 98 exhaust. Blowdown. 131 is what I timed. I have two of them here, and they both timed somewhere in here. Okay? Well, 1, 2 to 100. So 33 degrees of blowdown. Intake 152. Notice longer blowdown, more intake timing. Do you notice that? Okay, well, I hope that helped you guys kind of understand timing numbers. Notice most of the intakes are 144. That seems to be a consistent number. Now, what that means is, how far can you go? Well, in the next video, I'll kind of explain it to you guys. I'm going to give you a general cheat sheet on where I would recommend you start putting the timing numbers, and I'll give you a maximum exhaust roof height by cc displacement, and I'll talk about a few of the different brands and intake timing and what they'll tolerate. I've noticed some inconsistencies between Husqvarna and Stihl, and we can get into all that. Okay, that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that helps you guys understand timing numbers with common saws and how they run. Hopefully you own a saw in here and you go, I never thought about it, but it does run that way. Lower exhaust roof, shorter blowdown, shorter intake timing is usually a slow and steady, good firewood saw. As the exhaust roof gets higher, longer blowdown, more intake timing, often that'll make the saw have a little bit of a shorter power band, but it'll usually cut at a higher speed. That's been my experience. So when you port a saw, you have to decide what kind of a saw you like and where you're going with it. But anyways, I'm not going to get into porting today. I just wanted to talk stock timing numbers. I hope that helped you guys out. Thanks for watching. Take her easy, and I'll see you in a couple days. Later.